Welcome to this week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. I'm Jon Strum, and I'm the host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. I'm a past member of the International Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee, and currently I'm a district activist leader and trustee for the National MS Society, and I chair the Society's California Government Relations Advisory Committee. The MS Society's Ask an MS Expert webcast is designed to give us a place for the MS community to connect and to connect you with experts who are ready to answer your questions on the topics that impact people affected by MS every day. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. MS navigators are online throughout today's program, answering your questions and connecting you to resources. As people living with MS soon discover, MS symptoms vary from person to person, making it an unpredictable disease. It's rare to find even two people living with MS who are experiencing the exact same set of symptoms. And because MS symptoms can change or fluctuate over time, symptom management can be challenging. Today, we're talking with Rachael Stacom about how to recognize changes in MS symptoms and the best ways to manage them. Rachael is a nurse practitioner and the Senior Vice President of Clinical Programs and Population Health at Independence Care System, a New York State Medicaid health home and care management organization that provides care for people with physical disabilities and chronic conditions. We're also joined today by Marty Hines. Marty is a successful event producer, entrepreneur, film producer, and director who lives with MS. And we'll talk with Marty about how she manages her shifting symptoms. Rachael, Marty, welcome and thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Jon. Thank you.
So, Rachael, I'd like to start with you. Tell us, why do MS symptoms differ from person to person, and why can they vary from day to day?
Hi, Jon, and it's so nice to be with everyone today. I think that's a great question to start us off. MS symptoms are so different because MS disease activity is variable and often unpredictable. Signs and symptoms are dependent on the amount of nerve damage as well as which nerves are affected, what those nerves are responsible for doing. And there's also the person's experience of the symptoms, and that can vary. Just think, if I'm in a room with someone, I can find the temperature to be fine and that person can find it to be cold. And so as individuals, we have different experiences as well. Symptoms themselves can fluctuate or change, right? And day-to-day changes can be dependent on things like temperature, how much you slept, if you have an infection, when we're talking about temperature, for example, a small increase in body temperature can temporarily worsen signs and symptoms of MS. So for example, if someone might be working out and their body temperature rises, they can all of a sudden feel a symptom, or if they're taking a hot shower. And so if you remove that stimulus, the symptom can resolve. So some symptoms fluctuate and some symptoms remain.
So when someone notices a new symptom or maybe a change in an existing symptom, what does that mean and what should they do?
It's a great question. First, we want to make sure that it's really a new symptom or a change. And so we want to first make sure there is nothing else going on. I spoke about an infection and temperature and how temperature can affect it. So we want to make sure urinary tract infections can be common, for instance, in MS. We want to make sure there's nothing else going on. If it is a true change of a symptom or a new symptoms, that's what we call an exacerbation, right? Some people also might call it an attack or a relapse or a flare up. And if you're noticing, if you think that's what's going on, or if you think you might have an infection, you should reach out to your healthcare provider right away, your team, your neurologist, and let them know.
Marty, tell us a little bit about yourself. When were you diagnosed with MS, and what day-to-day symptoms do you experience?
I was diagnosed with MS in August of 2018. I did not have any pre-existing symptoms, so it was a very traumatic kind of introduction to the world of MS. I woke up paralyzed on the left side of my body, and that is a symptom that I still struggle with and suffer from, even now, almost 4 years later. To Rachel's point, whenever I am overly fatigued, if I get too hot, that's something that will flare up and I lose mobility. Other symptoms that have kind of just developed, over the course of, my disease has been brain fog, double vision, tremors, dysranthia, chronic fatigue, chronic pain. The list unfortunately goes on, but thankfully I am always working and finding new ways to try to manage my symptoms and, not let them kind of take over my day-to-day life.
Well, let's talk about some of those symptoms. I heard you just mention chronic pain, for instance. Explain a little bit about what that feels like to you.
Sure. So, for folks that are healthy, I think that when you think of pain, it's more of an acute situation where you're, feeling pain. It maybe goes away over some time, or maybe you take some medicine, or there's just ways to kind of deal with it and move on. But when you're living with chronic pain, it's a constant, just continual feeling state that you're in. And so an example, I know that Rachel, I'm sure you use it all the time. It's, what are your pain levels? Anything from 1, to 10. And so for me, my daily pain, if it's a normal day for me, is between a 5 and a 6. And so that's really, I think, hard for healthy folks to maybe kind of wrap their mind around and understand how someone could call that normal pain, because you really shouldn't be in pain. That's not normal. So I think that's the big difference, from chronic pain to acute pain.
How does that chronic pain impact your day-to-day activities, and what do you do to manage it?
So it really depends on the day. With MS, every day is a surprise. You just don't know what you're going to wake up with. I consistently, every morning, kind of just do a body check, and see, what's working, what's not, what symptoms are flaring up more than others. And then that kind of tells me what my day is going to be. So, you might start off thinking that I'm going to do all of these things, on a particular day, and my MS might have something else in mind. And so it's not allowing myself to get too frustrated in that, and be okay with if it turns out it's going to be a rest day for me, or I'm not going to be able to do everything that, I thought that I was going to do. But it's a very roller coaster of a emotion, of schedules. A lot of times I know that there's some jokes I've, seen from other folks that are MS warriors of, being called a flake, or, not reliable. But, MS really kind of takes control over a lot of that. And so just not being so hard on myself if it turns out that I can't do everything that I wanted to do, that day. And in terms of managing, I certainly have a ton of prescription medications, but I try to mix in a lot of holistic things as well. So whether that's exercise, vitamins, supplements, massages really help me. So there's just a lot of things holistically that I try to do together to try to make a little bit of a balance with my day-to-day symptoms.
Rachel, what causes chronic pain in MS, and how common is it?
Before I answer that, I just want to say, Marty, thank you for sharing your story. And, Yeah, I think when you hear a 5, right, with 10 being the worst possible pain, and that you're often at a 5, that's pretty incredible, right? That you're able to accomplish things, because many people would just say, I'm staying in bed. And so I think that resiliency and that kindness to yourself is so important, and admirable, that you
Thanks,
can do
Rachel.
that. Unfortunately, chronic pain is common, and it can be often a very disabling symptom of MS. There's a few types of pain that occur in people with MS. So there's neuropathic pains, what we call pain. Neuropathic pain is pain that happens from damaged nerves that carry signals to the body, from the body to the brain. And they're pain sensations that feel like burning, stabbing, sharp pain. And then there's also musculoskeletal pain that happens because of muscle spasms or weakness, stiffness, or because of injury. And then sometimes those pains can overlap each other too. And so, you're trying to kind of pull those things out and figure out what's going on.
So how does someone know if the pain they're experiencing is caused by their MS or perhaps something else?
So there are some clues. Description is really important. So when I say burning, if someone says that, I think, neuropathic pain. Location can help us. So the most, for me, what I will ask people is like, tell me about the pain, right? And I use an acronym, in addition to your scale that you use, Marty. I use an acronym called OLD CART when I'm asking someone about their pain. And OLD is onset, when did it start? Where's the location? D is duration, how long has it been there? And then the CART is, what are the characteristics? Tell me, right? What does the pain feel like? Throbbing, achy. What are aggravating things makes the pain worse? And then R is relieving, what makes it better? And what treatment, what have you tried to do and did it help? So those are some of the things that will put the picture together to see, is this MS related? And we also do clinical exam. What's happening in that area that that might be causing pain? And sometimes we use MRIs to help us as well to put the picture together.
Well, the T in your acronym is for treatment. So
Yes.
I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about the treatments that are available to help manage pain.
Sure. And so when we're talking about, the most important thing about pain is to identify the source, what's causing it, and then treat that. And so just giving an example, if someone has weakness to a side of their body and it's impacting the way they walk, and so we call walking gait, we have all these weird words in healthcare. So if someone has an abnormal gait, and they're putting more pressure on the stronger leg, well, that could result in hip pain. And so the treatment for that should focus on how can we help identify, how can we help reduce the pressure that's putting on that hip, right? So we want to increase the strength, improve the gait, and then while also treating the pain. So in that circumstance, Motrin could be helpful with the pain, the medication, right, along with physical therapy. Neuropathic pain from MS responds differently than other pain. So it doesn't usually respond to Motrin or to narcotics like other pains do. The medications used to treat neuropathic pain, both for acute and chronic, include anti-seizure medications and certain types of antidepressants that are aimed at decreasing nerve activity. For muscular pain, spasticity management can include medications to lessen that stiffness, and stretching exercises can be very important in those circumstances to help reduce the stiffness as well. And Marty brought up some great things too. Massage therapy can be very helpful. Acupuncture can be helpful. So those complementary therapies we want to explore as well. And I think Marty had said this in her story, right? That she's still looking at managing her symptoms. So sometimes it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But rehab is definitely, our rehab therapists are our friends when we're looking to address pain. And then another treatment modality that I have seen be helpful is something called cognitive behavioral therapy. Can also be helpful to help people kind of process the pain experience for them and where they can place it in their life.
Many people with MS experience difficulty walking, so they use a mobility aid to help them move around safely. Rachel, what causes walking difficulties in MS?
So gait abnormalities or difficulty walking is one of the most common mobility limitations in MS, and it can be related to several factors. So people say, oh, you need a mobility aid, and they think that it's due to weakness, and weakness can certainly cause problems with gait. So if your leg muscles aren't functioning, aren't as strong as they used to be, that can cause some changes in your gait. Spasticity can do that too, right? If your muscles are too tight, that can interfere. Balance, if your balance is impacted from MS, that can result in an unsteady, right, or a staggering gait. We call that ataxia. Sensory deficits. So some people have numbness in their feet and they can't tell when they've hit the floor. And so that can also impact mobility, as well as fatigue. If you are tired, right, people with and without MS can understand that if you are exhausted, walking can be very, very hard. And we know that people with MS have endurance issues, which can impact their walking as well.
So if someone's experiencing walking difficulties, is it possible for them to improve their walking? And if it is, how would they go about doing that?
So the good news is most gait problems can be improved to some extent. Stretching can help, strengthening exercises can help, assistive devices can be a lifesaver. Medications for spasticity, right? So you want to look at, I listed about 5 reasons of why walking can be impaired. And so looking at those reasons. So medication, if it's because of spasticity, medication can help. You want to make sure that's a fine line, right? Because if you're using things to relax your muscle, you still need your muscle to walk. But exploring things for that, for fatigue, right? It's the last thing you want to do, but exercise can really help people with fatigue issues. We also have some medications that sometimes can help people. We also have a medication, delphamidine, or known as Empira, which can help people with walking as well.
Can you share some safety tips to prevent falls that people with MS should keep in mind?
Sure. Again, we're going to say, go back to the origin, right? This is like a theme that's coming up. What's causing the impairment? And let's go to the source and try to treat it. So, do you have the right supports and equipment? So we talked about equipment. Some people, for instance, might be falling because they have what's called as the drop foot. So their foot, kind of flops down and then they trip over their foot. So there's an orthotic called an AFO, an ankle foot orthotic, that kind of goes in the shoe and will help keep your foot upright. That can help. Sometimes heat. We talked about heat being a factor in weakness. So sometimes people can go in the shower and say, I get so weak, and then I trip in the bathroom, which is, by the way, makes me really nervous because there's such hard surfaces there. So getting something like a shower chair could really make a difference, or having someone there to support you. So wheelchairs, I know, have really, given people restored independence for people and also helped reduce falls. But really look at if someone has fallen, what caused the fall, right? What was the impetus for the fall? And if it was because of obstacles, try to remove those. Area rugs are not that great. You can trip over them easily. I know they look really nice. If you really want them, can we make sure that they're down and flat, that you won't get caught? So really looking out to see what are some triggers for falls. Lighting is really important, right? If it's dark, we bump into things, and then if your balance is off, you're going to fall. So paying attention to what's playing a role is important.
Marty, you use a mobility aid. Tell us, how has it helped you?
Yes, I have several mobility aids. I use a walker. Some days I have a cane. And then I also have a scooter for when I go to Disney World. I love Disney. And so the only way that I'm able to actually get through the parks is with my scooter. So I'm really grateful for that. But so yes, I have a whole host of aids. And to Rachel's point, there's a lot of different reasons why people with MS have difficulty walking. For me, it's definitely the neuropathic pain. Every kind of step that I take is a burning sensation in my feet. So it's just very painful to walk. It's not necessarily so much of a gait or, a weakness. It just really hurts. So I don't like to walk too far. That's why I have a disabled tag for my car so that, I can get to wherever I need to go without having to kind of walk through the whole parking lot. But the walker is great. My walker has a seat on it, so I can take a break and just literally take a seat wherever I am before getting back up to continue going wherever I go. And then I use my cane just when I'm having more of the weakness, which does happen, at times. And so it's just kind of a great stabilizer for me. And then, as I mentioned, my scooter, I just drive it. It's decked out with Mickey ears, and I ride it through the parks, which is great because it's hot in Florida. And so that heat, adding then all of those steps, it's a great device to have. And it really is something that I had to get comfortable with because, MS, as Jon and we've talked about it before, but it is an invisible illness. And so I don't always, look sick. So there was definitely just some, insecurities, about, people looking or wondering why I'm, parking in a handicapped space, or, why am I on a scooter? Am I just lazy? Or, so kind of getting over that and leaning into it more has made it where I can just have better days. So it certainly took me some time and something I still struggle with from time to time, but for the most part, I've gotten past it.
Another symptom that you mentioned was brain fog. More than half of all the people with MS are going to develop problems with cognition. And sometimes cognitive issues are among the first symptoms of MS. Marty, can you talk a little bit about what brain fog is like for you and how it affects you in terms of dealing with everyday life?
Sure. Brain fog is, for me and just my personality, it was one of the scariest symptoms that I started to experience, when I first was having symptoms, because I have always considered myself to be, pretty sharp, can retain. I used to be able to speed read. There was just something I kind of prided myself on, in terms of traits cognitively. And so brain fog or cog fog, it terrified me when I was losing words, losing a train of thought, but not so much in the sense of, I forgot what I was, going to say, but literally like, I don't even know what's really happening right now. And it was, it's just a very scary experience, especially at such a young age, to just completely forget and not be aware of what it is you were saying or how you got into the sentence in the first place. And it really kind of comes out of nowhere to the point of, leaving my car running when I get out of it and, going to run my errands, and I come back and I see that the car's still on because I, had no idea that I did that. So just things like that are examples of that kind of brain fog that is just very frustrating because for me, I feel like I just want to shake myself, and kind of try to like snap back into the moment that I'm supposed to be in, and then I can't. And so I get very frustrated for sure.
Rachel, what steps should someone take if they experience brain fog or notice a change in their cognitive function?
I think it's really important to reach out to your medical team. You want to let them know, right? Just when you started this, you asked about a change in the symptom or a new symptom or a worsening symptom. Let them know that something is going on so they can help figure out, pinpoint the source and then start problem solving on what to do.
Are there strategies available to manage changes in cognitive function?
There is actually cognitive rehab. And some of those things, I'm not a cognitive rehab specialist, but I refer to my colleagues, and they can be speech therapists, occupational therapists, and neuropsychologists can be very helpful. So there are two activities. One is restorative, right? That include learning and memory exercises. I know one of the restorative exercises that kind of sat with me when I learned them is that you are more likely to learn something if you see it, say it, hear it, write it, do it, right? As opposed to just listening. You're more likely to ingrain it. And then there are compensatory activities that many of us use without MS, right? Which is put things in your phone. My calendar is like, I rely on that for everything. So we also live in a world with Alexa and Google and using things like that to prompt us. Tell me at 4 o'clock today that I have to take my medicine. And then the other thing is to create patterns, right? In compensatory, which is I often forget where I put my keys or where I put my cane, and then I spend hours looking for it, which exhausts me. And then I'm fatigued. And so creating new habits of saying, okay, when I come home, like I had a gentleman that I worked with who kept misplacing his cane. And he said, you know what, I got an umbrella holder at my door and I stick my cane in it. And now it's a habit. Like I was conscious about it and now it's a habit. So things like that can certainly help with cognitive impairment.
Well, you both shared some really helpful insights about recognizing and managing changing symptoms in MS. Now, I'd like to ask each of you to share your top 3 takeaways that you'd like our audience to remember. And Marty, why don't you start us off with your top 3 takeaways?
Sure. So I talk about it every opportunity that I can. I certainly mentioned it in our conversation, is just remembering to give yourself grace. That is always something that I try to say and remind myself of when dealing with living with any type of a chronic illness. And so that for sure is the first one. And then another takeaway is, it's okay to kind of ask for help and to reach out to your support system and share with them, what you need and try to bring them along this journey with you. MS is a very isolating disease in itself. And so I think you really have to push yourself to not let it be, such a bubble or where you kind of cocoon yourself. So, taking that step out and involving your friends and family, into this journey with you is something that I certainly have taken away. And then the last one is advocating for yourself. Rachel mentioned, letting your care team know what's kind of going on with you. That's what they're there for. And so my favorite nurse is actually named Rachel. And so I bother her all of the time, with whatever I think I'm feeling that feels different or feels off, or, what I've Googled or something that I've read. An article, I'll message my doctors and ask them, did they see this article? What are their thoughts on it? And so it's really building that relationship with your care team, advocating, not letting someone tell you what you're feeling. So if you know that you aren't feeling well and they tell you, well, this test came back that you were fine. Well, I'm not fine. So what are we doing next? So I would say that is something that I've learned over these years. I used to think going to the doctor, you went to the doctor, you told them what was wrong, they fixed you. That was the end of it. But when you have a chronic illness, you have to really take control and be an active participant in your care. And so that's a big one for me too.
Great advice. And Rachel, what are your top 3 takeaways?
So I am going to jump on Marty's bandwagon about the care team and just put a note of communication. If we're talking about symptoms, if you are noticing something, tell your team, right? And to be effective requires you to have a team that you can communicate with. You have to feel comfortable, right? I think Marty gave a good example. Like, I reach out to Rachel and she's responsive, and it's really important that you have that. If you feel like you don't, the MS Society has a great list of resources for you to create your care team, right? It's kind of, I really want to encourage you all to feel like you are in the control seat in creating your team. Also, in regards to symptoms, I would say get to know them. Don't try to ignore them. Really understand what's going on. Use old cart if it serves you, but get insight into when it's presenting and how it's impacting you. I tell people to keep a symptom diary. Write it down when it's really, bothering you, and what was the scenario. And then the last thing is to say, grace is an important thing. Symptom management frequently involves a lot of tweaking, right? And I wish it could be a one-stop shop, but it often is not. So we'll develop it, right? And make sure when you're saying, okay, you're talking to your care team that you have great communication with, you can say, okay, what's the plan? When can I expect this to work? Because sometimes medication or treatment has to build up, right? So what's the plan? When can I expect it to begin to help me? And when should I communicate back if it is or if it's not? Back to the communication.
Rachael Stacom and Marty Hines, thank you both for being with us today. Before we close, I want to remind you that the National MS Society's MS Navigator team is your best partner when it comes to connecting you to the very best information and resources on living with MS. You can reach an MS Navigator by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. For information and resources on MS, please visit the National MS Society's website. You'll find research updates and news, information on connection programs like self-help groups and MS Friends, ways for you to get involved, and upcoming events that are taking place near you. And remember, you can connect with the National MS Society and others affected by MS on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I hope you'll join me every week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where I continue the conversation that we start here. You'll find Real Talk MS at realtalkms.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. I'd like to thank Rachael Stacom and Marty Hines for joining us today. Please remember that a recording of this webcast will be available at the Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. I hope you'll join us at this same time for next week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. You can always find our upcoming program topics on the National MS Society's website. Now I have a favor to ask each of you. Getting your feedback on today's webcast is important. So if you're watching us on Facebook Live, you'll see a link to that survey pinned to the comments section. And on YouTube, you'll find that link in the program description. Completing the survey makes a real difference. The information you provide helps us continuously improve, and it helps shape future programs. The survey takes just 1 minute, so I hope you'll take a minute to fill it out. On behalf of Rachael Stacom, Marty Hines, and the National MS Society, I want to thank you once again for joining us. Please stay safe and make healthy choices.